lovely data we have here in Excel. So there might be some other better ways to do this, but that's what Google's for. Anyway, here's what I'd like to do. So I want to graph, my first graph is, I'd like to have my graph the centripetal force versus the average period. So what I'm going to do is go over here and highlight this section of data, and then in order to do this, at least on the Macintosh, and I have to use the command key, which is that one that's got the funny little swirly symbol on it. For IBMs, I think that you use Control. I don't know. You can try some things. But what I'm going to do is press the command key, and then I highlight all of this. Oh, went too far. So let me do that one more time. Highlight this, command, highlight all of this. Okay. Then I go up to charts, and what I want to do, always in physics, is we do a scatter chart. So I click on this. I want marked scatter. So it comes up and it looks all pretty and nice. First, we don't need the series, it just takes up real estate. But the problem is that I want to have the centripetal force on the y-axis. And as you can see, based on these numbers, this is clearly the period. So I need to switch these. So what I'm going to do is click on all of my data points so that they're all highlighted. And then what I want to do is a right click, or I think for Mac users it's a control click. The way that I'm doing it is I'm putting 2 fingers on my mouse pad and then clicking. And what that is I would like to select data. So if you're not sure where to get to, you can always go to the help menu and figure out and do a help search for the select data, and that should show where another path that you can go if you can't make this work. So I did select data, and what this is doing is this is saying that for this chart, these are the values it's putting in for the x. These are the values it's putting in for the y. There's 2 ways to change these. Since I know I want to swap them, and I know I want my y values to be A3 to A9, I can just go and type that in here. And I want this to be E3 to E9, I can just type it in. Another way of doing that is I can click on this symbol here, and that was for A, so I want my x values to be this. But the problem is that right now my graph's kind of covering it. But anyway, you can go and select all of that. I'm just going to type it because that's easier. So I know that I want this to be an E. I want that to be an E. I want this to be an A. And I want that to be an A. And so the reason why mine says P4 up here, and yours probably doesn't, but this is telling me that I'm on, because as I did this lab with all of you, I did it for each period and I used a new sheet for every period. So that's just saying that I'm looking at period 4's data, and that's what that is. Yours might say sheet 1, sheet 4, I don't know. The important thing is that you're just switching this range. So I want my y values to go from A3 to A9, and you can see that here. I wanted the washers on the y-axis, and I want to go from A3 to A9. And the same thing for my average period, I wanted to go E3 to E9. The dollar signs are just a way for when we copy things or whatever, but that's just saying it's a fixed cell, and that if you were to copy it over, it won't change the actual cell that you're copying. So that's not important. The important thing is you switch those right there. Click OK. Ta-da! Now I have my washers over here, my period down here. Everything is good, except for the fact that I have nothing interesting on this graph. So what I want to do is add a chart title. So then I click over here on chart layout, and I click on chart title. I'd like a title above my chart. And so in IB, what we always do is we say graph 1. And this is going to be, we always list our y-axis first. So this is going to be centripetal force versus period. I also have to label my axes. So I go to the axis titles, horizontal axis, title below the axis, shows up here. And so this is going to be average period. Oops, did not spell that right. Period. And for this one, it was plus minus 0.04 seconds. This is the format IB likes you to use because you put the title of your variable, you put your uncertainty, and then you put the units. So it's very efficient. So you don't have to go and say average period, seconds, plus minus 0.04 seconds. It's just all right there. And if you want to, if you don't want to put SEC, you can just put an S. Doesn't matter. Our vertical axis. I do the rotated title. Double click on it here. This one is my centripetal force. And this is plus, minus. This one was 5%, and the units were washers. There, that looks pretty nice. So just to expand on this, now have a nice looking graph, but what we usually want is we want a trend line. So again, I click on my data points, and again I could right click, or just for fun I'll show you another way. We can go to chart, and I can do add trend line. And for this one, looking at this graph, I can see it's definitely not linear. So I'm going to do a power. And so I can see that that really matches my data very well. So a power is the appropriate trend line. And you have some options. If you would like, for your final graph, you should do this, but you can always do display equation on the chart. And there we go. So looking at this equation, it's probably hard for you to see, but it actually says it's x to the negative 1.832. And as you know from this lab, we're eventually creating a graph that's 1 over t squared, and that's where we're getting it. And so essentially we could go from this graph, and I know that the y is my centripetal force, and then I can see that the x, which is my period, is really to approximately the negative 2 power. And so if you wanted to, you could talk about how you got this equation, how it suggested that, and you could probably just jump to your 1 over t squared graph. But again, for the DCP, you would have to write all of this out and explain your processing and explain how you did this. Essentially, that's all you need for graph 1. I'm going to skip ahead to graph 3 because I wanted to show you error bars. Graph 2 is very similar to the same processes, so that's why I'm not going to waste your time here. But let's take a look at graph 3. Of course, like a chef or something, I already have all these graphs done. Let's see here, which is the graph that I want. Nope. All these graphs. Okay, so I set up graph 3, and I did it very similarly to the way that we've already done this, but of course now you can see it's all linear. So let me first change something, because on this, what we should have for our units here is we can say that the units are seconds to the minus 2, but on this, the uncertainty varies. So usually we like to mention that, so I say uncertainty varies. And so what you could do is say C table 1. C table 1. And that way all the uncertainties are listed there. So here I have all these nice error bars. And so let me delete all these so that you can see how I actually got to them. So your graph won't have all of this. So actually I think what I'm going to do is stop this video here and start another video that just talks about adding error bars. So I'll have 3 videos. Okay, looking forward to seeing you at the next one.